One of the interesting things here is that the Trump administration has rescinded the definition of harm under the Endangered Species Act. They did not replace it with anything. So right now, the Endangered Species Act regulations just don't include any definition of harm. If they are just violating the statute, the text of the act itself, which of course has supremacy even over the regulations, there is not a safe harbor for them from what the administration recently did. So if somebody goes and destroys habitat for an endangered species and does what would reasonably be considered harming that species, they are risking penalties under the Endangered Species Act.
You're listening to the Rewilding Earth podcast. I'm your host, Jack Humphrey. Imagine a law that protects nesting seabirds, but lets a timber company cut down their nesting trees as long as the birds aren't sitting in them when the chainsaws start. That's the reality the administration is trying to force on us by quietly gutting the definition of harm under the Endangered Species Act. At its core, rewilding is impossible without protected habitat, because whether we're restoring long-lost core habitats or protecting existing species, animals can't recover if they don't have a safe home to return to. To help us make sense of this, I'm joined by Earthjustice Senior Attorney Ben Levitan. Ben's on the front lines fighting these rollbacks in court, and today he explains why this effort to bypass habitat protection isn't just ecologically reckless, it's flat out illegal. Ben, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the Rewilding Earth podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I really, really respect your time because I can't imagine what it's like to be you. Like, it's had to have been a quite crazy almost 2 years now, but probably far longer. You've been around for all of it. So it's really great to talk to you about what's going on with the Endangered Species Act, the new attack, the other attacks, but also just to take a peek into what it's like to be sometimes one of the last defenders in the line of an attack on the natural world. So again, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And yeah, it's been a crazy 2 years. It's also been a crazy 2 weeks and a crazy 2 decades. So any way you look at it,
yeah,
it's a lot going on.
It's coming in twos.
Right.
Yeah. Here's what it feels like to me on this side of what you do. We saw press releases coming out from Center and Earthjustice and others last week talking about another new attack on the Endangered Species Act, which we're going to talk about. But there's headline after headline. And I don't know that many people are getting much of a chance to stop and think about any particular attack on the natural world, as opposed to just trying to keep afloat with everything that's going on at all times. Last week, press releases come out. Everybody is aghast. I can't believe this is happening and blah, blah, blah. But then it just dies down eerily quickly because either the next crisis is happening, it might be a conservation thing, or it's most likely something else that gets the headline. And in this particular case, I think that's very unfair and because this is such a seemingly egregious attack. Can you take us through what was announced last week and kind of get us caught up to where we are now with the latest attack?
Yeah, I think it's unfair, as you said. I also think it's deliberate. We actually had 2 consecutive Fridays now where there were Friday afternoon news releases from federal agencies attacking the Endangered Species Act in various ways. So, this is unpopular. They're trying to do it in a way that's difficult for people to follow and just serve special extractive interests that certainly are paying attention and hope that most of the public that supports the Endangered Species Act just isn't able to track it all. But, to get to the issue that we're mainly here to discuss, this kicked off 2 Fridays ago when the federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service, announced that they were rescinding the regulatory definition of harm from their Endangered Species Act regulations. And what that means, what they're effectively trying to do, is eliminate the definition that considers habitat destruction to be harm. Of course, under the Endangered Species Act, you can't harm an endangered species, and that has always been understood to include habitat destruction, because if you destroy a species habitat, then you might as well just be shooting the species, right? I mean, that has the inevitable effect of depleting that species and driving it to extinction.
Yeah.
And somehow this administration feels that habitat destruction should not count as harm and just should not be regulated under the Endangered Species Act. And, to give you an example of what we're talking about, there are so many species that we could look to, but one that's a great example is the marbled murrelet in the Pacific Northwest. It's a seabird that lives most of its life at sea. And every year it has to utilize the old growth forest in the Pacific Northwest to lay its eggs. Under this new policy, someone could go and log that forest really as long as there wasn't a bird in the tree as it's being cut down. Someone could just log that forest and it wouldn't count as harming marbled murrelets, even though the next time they went to lay their eggs, there would be no place for them to do it. And that population wouldn't be sustained.
Do you sometimes feel like we're working with Neanderthals in the government now? Like, it seems so dumb on its surface. I mean, it's infuriating. It's very, very serious. But after I got through all those emotions, I thought, who do they think we are? What do they think the Endangered Species Act is? Like, they're literally going after the one thing they don't like because they're big developers. Like, they just seem so dumb, and I don't know how they think this is going to fly. There's literally no way this is going to fly, right?
There is so much that is wrong with this policy, and there are so few people who are helped in, very targeted financial ways by this, and everyone else is going to pay the price. But you're right, this clearly violates the text of the Endangered Species Act. It clearly violates the purpose of the Endangered Species Act. When Congress passed the Endangered Species Act, they knew what was driving species to extinction. They knew then, as now, habitat destruction is the biggest driver of extinction. They had that squarely in mind. So the idea that the Endangered Species Act is supposed to be oblivious to habitat destruction is outrageous and implausible. Obviously, you just can't save an endangered species if it doesn't have a place to live. And pointing to just all of the facts and evidence that the administration ignored, if you look at the documents that they released accompanying this new policy, there's no discussion of science. There's no real acknowledgement of the effects that this policy will have on the species. They're just saying, oh, this is some legalistic fix that we're making. Meanwhile, during the public comment period for this proposal, when it was proposed last year, they got about 358,000 comments. All but a tiny sliver were opposing what they've done now. And they weren't just comments saying, we don't like this. So, of course, there were a lot of people rightly saying that, but also, thousands and thousands of pages of scientific evidence, as if it wasn't intuitive, but, scientific evidence about the importance of habitat to species. And they just ignored all of that. They have absolutely no ecological support for what they've done, and unfortunately don't seem especially concerned about it. I would say one of the frustrating things about this policy is that it's in total defiance of a Supreme Court decision from 1995 that upheld the definition of harm that included habitat destruction. So I think, the administration is really trying to roll the dice and just give it all another shot and see if they can get a different outcome this time. it's hard for us to make predictions about how any case is going to go. I can say, in this case in particular, the facts are on our side, the science is certainly on our side, and the law is on our side. So our process of just, making that argument, which is extremely strong here, and putting it before whatever court we find ourselves in front of, is what we do. And I think that a judge looking at this fairly would have to conclude that harm is prohibited by the Endangered Species Act.
So if there is, and it's scary to think that they might be even trying to play chess, but if there's a chess move here and this is just giving up a pawn or something for a larger, how do they benefit by keeping you guys so busy on things like this that you should never have to litigate, that you should never have to work on, but now you have to spend time and resources on, constantly fighting, on the surface kind of ridiculous battles that they've given you the upper hand here really quite easily, but it's taking up your time, it's taking up treasure. Is there a bigger game afoot here?
Well, look, they're throwing everything at the wall and they'll see what sticks. I don't think that it's serving anybody especially well. Take a lot of resources for organizations like Earthjustice, but I'm glad that we're able to do it. That's kind of why we're here. We're there to be the ones paying attention, so that if they try to confuse everyone by attacking the Endangered Species Act through like 5 different regulations, which is what they're doing now, rather than just showing people what they're doing in a comprehensible way, like we will be there, blow for blow, fighting against it. It creates incredible confusion, even among the regulated community. Now it's not clear what the requirements are. There is official administration policy that seems clearly contradictory to what the statute requires. And a lot of this is so absurd that it's likely to be reversed either in court or by the next administration. This administration likes to have these kind of splashy announcements and make it look like they're taking big actions, but this is not a stable environment for anybody on any side of this issue.
Yeah, when these press releases come out and we see them, and then we start putting out, we meaning organizations start putting out social media alerts, sharing the stuff that you guys put out. I wonder sometimes if people think that once that's out there, that this has already become law, or this administration is already acting as if, just because they declared something, and they don't know as much about the process that we're going through right now, that you're going through right now, to make sure that it doesn't become part of the law. So could you describe really what's actually happening, like between one of these announcements and what's really happening on the ground, or what should or should not be happening on the ground while you guys are working this out in the courts?
Yeah. Some of these take a long time, even as this administration is rushing things through pretty quickly. The proposal for this rescission of a harm definition actually appeared last spring, 2025, and that's when we all submitted comments. I got those hundreds of thousands of comments, and if anything, it took them longer than we expected to finalize it. So, it's finalized a couple of weeks ago. It's published in the Federal Register last week. So it is on the books as a regulation now, but this is just when the litigation is beginning. So we filed suit at Earthjustice on behalf of 9 conservation organizations. There were also a couple of tribes that filed suit, and other conservation organizations filed their own lawsuits. So all of that is going to move forward, and we will have to see, how the litigation plays out. But the story is far from over. There are many people who need to weigh in. I will say, though, the administration is going to consider this good, effective law, really starting now. Technically, there's an effective date of 60 days after the regulation is published, but that's sort of an administrative quirk. But they will say that their policy is now the law of the land. It still violates the statute, so they don't have the right to say that it's the law of the land. But their behavior and what they are telling extractive industries they're allowed to do will be based on their misinterpretation of the law or their deliberate misconstrual of the law. And so that's something that could start playing out in the near term that we're concerned about.
So cynically, I'm thinking, but not without examples and that. But I'm thinking, okay, so somebody might be smart enough to know that they can open this up for long enough that the court system's going to move slow enough that the legal system to, they know they're not going to get to keep this window open, but all they have to do is open the window a crack, which sounds like that's what they've done, because if they're treating this as law now, then these guys who have been waiting for their pet projects for years, sometimes decades even, get to move forward as if. Therefore, by the time you guys get this all put back together, somebody's already built their subdivision. Somebody's already broken ground for a mine or something, right? I mean, this is the danger that we're facing.
Yeah, but it's a big risk for them if they want to do that, because they would be violating the Endangered Species Act. If someone moves forward,
they can't just say Trump said I could and then get out of it. They still would have to face the full.
Hopefully. Yeah. Yes. And one of the interesting things here is that the Trump administration has rescinded the definition of harm under the Endangered Species Act. They did not replace it with anything. So right now, the Endangered Species Act regulations just don't include any definition of harm. So there's really nothing for those people to point to if they are just violating the statute, the text of the act itself, which of course is, has supremacy even over the regulations. There is not a safe harbor for them from what the administration recently did. So if somebody goes and destroys habitat for an endangered species and does what would reasonably be considered harming that species, they are risking penalties under the Endangered Species Act.
Could this be a case of Trump making a move that the industry didn't even ask for? Like, I remember times where he's done things and it looked like it was clearly at the behest of like oil companies or something. And then the oil companies, once they got what he said they wanted, they don't take advantage, like oil leases and things like that. And that's when when those things started happening, I started thinking, man, he just does a lot of stuff on his own that looks like someone asked him to do it. But that doesn't mean they're going to do it, because they might not even be as interested in it as he appears to be.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier a couple of times now all the comments that were submitted last year opposing this policy. There was a tiny sliver of those comments that supported the policy, and that included coalitions of oil companies, mining companies, logging companies. So, there was support for it, but even some of those comments, I think, realized that this was going to be kind of a perilous, lawless Wild West that they were stepping into, and said, okay, like generally we like what you're doing, but we would still like to have a little more guidance about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And that was not offered. So those companies, just like all the rest of us, are now just having to try to like pick up the piece from this destructive rescission.
Wilderness is self-willed land. A wild animal is a self-willed animal. They are earthlings that are as yet not thralls to man. Those words from Dave Foreman define why we do what we do. The Rewilding Earth podcast is a long-running project of the Rewilding Institute. Because of listeners, donations, and people and organizations sharing this podcast with others, you've helped us spread the blueprint for a wilder, more self-willed world. But we can't let up. Most of the world still needs to absorb what it means to restore nature for its own sake. Please consider making a donation today to support the show. Your gift helps us reach the next generation of rewilders who will rebalance the natural world. Go to rewilding.org/donate to help us spread the word. And thanks for standing with the wild.
So the landscape is just too uncertain for a reasonable company to take the kind of risk that he opened them up to by not going. I don't know how much further he could have gone, but paving the way for them to feel confident now that they can open a mine or log a forest, or it sounds like that there's just too much uncertainty there for those folks, those special interests, to take advantage of this.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do, but they would certainly be taking a risk. There are some unsettled issues here, and someone may or may not want to step up and be the first company that is the test case for liability under the Endangered Species Act.
Lawyers from any company are going to look at this and immediately go, Earthjustice Center, all these guys, they have the upper hand here. This is not going to fly. I mean, they have really smart, high-paid people that can tell them what's going on here. Like, let's just see what happens here, because even our own lawyers would be telling them, right, that this is really not going to fly. This is not good. And we shouldn't make any moves until we find out what happens.
Yeah, and there's a multifaceted risk assessment here. Part of it is the legal element that you just laid out, and I think part of it is the public relations element, where they know, just like they don't have the legal arguments on their side, they don't have the public on their side. The public does not want companies to go around destroying the habitat of endangered species without any consequences. And so, what company is going to subject itself to being the poster child for that? Like, maybe some would, but a lot of them would probably have second thoughts.
It's just a strange thing. If it was really targeted and people were really getting things checked off their wish lists, there would be it would seem, some sort of an attack on the Endangered Species Act that would pave the way. Like, it really, and it just seems like a litmus test that you could know before even going into it that it's not going to land well with the public. Therefore, it's going to be very, very difficult to make any significant changes to such an act. It's one of the most beloved acts in the history of the country. One of our best ideas, a response to a very serious, critical problem. And everybody loves it. There's nobody out there that hates the Endangered Species Act except for developers and oil and logging and those guys. Like, it just seems very weird to even try to attack something like that. It feels like they're just pushing buttons and trying to test boundaries to see what they can get away with. But I'm not sure what the end goal is when they can't help companies to move forward with theirs. It's still a murky situation for them.
Yeah, and you're right. And the Endangered Species Act polls extremely well across the political spectrum. It's really not an ideologically divisive issue. I think people understand that we had inherited an incredible world that is spiritually and emotionally fulfilling and has a lot of material benefits for us, and we don't want to have to pass that along in some permanently diminished state.
One of the things I also wanted, because we don't often get people like you on our show, it would be really cool to give people some insight on what it's like to be you day to day in this environment, where you see the challenges, and also what kind of hopeful stuff are you seeing out there? I've heard from others who work with the center and other places that are like, well, we win a lot of these things because they're so unprepared most of the time, or they're just really shooting in the dark or trying to throw everything, like you said earlier, at the wall. But I mean, there are real threats too. It's just got to be so incredibly much more charged day to day than you were used to previous to this era.
Yes, that is a fair statement, just in terms of the barrage of things that we're dealing with. It's an administration that seems to prioritize quantity over quality, and every day there's something else that either we are worrying about or we should be worrying about. One of the benefits of my job is, I'm an attorney, so I represent clients, and being at Earthjustice, we represent our clients for no charge and represent a lot of conservation organizations and advocates who have been working on these issues for decades. They know the value of species and habitats and ecosystems. And they've been doing this for long enough. I know that they are going to keep doing it, as bleak as things get at the federal level. They aren't people who like wake up in the morning and read the headlines to figure out what their values are, what they should be devoting their lives to. And so a lot of the hope that I get is just from the clients that we serve and seeing, their commitment from one administration to the next. And it reminds me that as bad as things are now, and as in some cases irreversible as some of the damage is, this is a moment in time, and the reservoir of concern for the environment and care for these species that just exists out there in the country among the people who are really on the ground and working to improve their communities, like that's going to last. That's going to outlast this administration.
This naturally takes us to that really good question that somebody had about putting Humpty Dumpty back together, like this big shattered mess that's all over the government, period. It's all over the conservation related stuff and laws. And I ended up on the agency website, and they had already polluted it with this information as if it was just done. And this is it. There's no harm. There's no such thing. And it was egregious. I can't remember what they said, but something even derogatory on a government site. It's just all of those norms are gone. And I just feel sorry for the people who have to put all those pieces back together, just the misinformation and politically driven stuff that's on government websites, but also just the mess that's being made now. Do you guys get time to sit around and have beers and talk about what we're going to do, what needs to be done, and especially in your world from a legal perspective, to begin putting all of this stuff back together when and if that time comes that we have that opportunity?
We absolutely do. And, there are a couple of buckets here, because there are some bad things that are happening now that just have to be reversed. And, this business about the definition of harm is one of them. That's obvious that once there's a rational administration, harm has to be acknowledged as including habitat destruction. On the other hand, no one is pretending that things were perfect before this administration. We had a lot of environmental laws and policies that had been, cobbled together over a long time, and we're doing great work in many cases, but inadequate work in others. That is one of the challenges that we are facing going forward, because there have been so many attacks on so many policies that you could easily spend probably the next several administrations just trying to restore everything that was destroyed. Some of that's necessary. Some of it might not be the best use of time. We might say, here's like an opportunity. If we have to rebuild anyway, let's see how we can do this better. Let's see how we can move forward in a way that doesn't leave as many people, communities, and ecosystems behind.
I was also wondering about the public comments, because we're always turning around after we see something in the news, something from one of our coalitions, and either they will say it or we will say it all over our newsletters and everything. Go here to comment. You mentioned a couple of times that there were 300,000 some comments.
Yeah.
How well do you use those nowadays? How well do those make a dent in your case?
Yeah, I think the comments are incredibly important, and they should be used to inform what the administration does. Now, we're not under any illusions here, right? Like, we know that this administration is perfectly capable of just dismissing what people say, dismissing what the majority of the concerns are. But I think that they are still important because the administration is not the only player here. And if we're trying to explain what has happened and how public opinion has been defied in the media, or to members of Congress, or one day to an administration that's willing to take another look at this, I think having that record of how unpopular these policies are will help elevate them, both in public consciousness and will make them, well, just to kind of tee them up for reversal in the future. What would really frighten me is if people stopped expressing their opposition and there was no record, even for these policies that comments can't stop. We need that record of how many people don't want them to go forward. We need a record of how the popular will is being discounted and disrespected.
It never really occurred to me that they could be used this way, but every time one of these things comes up, you guys collect a lot of data that proves very strong sentiment behind what you're fighting for. And yes, that does now seem incredibly much more valuable to me than I previously thought.
Right. And, the New York Times ran a story about this harm definition, and they actually did, computer analysis of all the comments and found that 99% opposed what the administration is doing. That's a, really high profile public statement on the record that, everyone who reads that New York Times article is going to see. And, that's because of all the people who clicked that button to submit their comment. And, it was so important that everyone did that.
Have you been surprised by any instance where you felt like America was unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, but unintentionally exposed in a way that we were just relying on trust or culture or history more than we were codified law to prevent some of these things from happening? Because to me, it feels like we went into this extreme, this is exposing all of the different ways that we were exposed. All of these years, all of these decades, all of these presidents, that our system could be taken this advantage of was, to me, a really surprising thing. He can do that? They can do that? Is that unilateral? And I think a lot of people are thinking that way. Was there ever a point where you realized, I really can't believe that this was even possible?
Yeah, it's certainly disheartening at times to see this administration's approach to the law. And I think under most prior administrations, it was easy to take for granted that the administration would at least try to follow the law. And I think one of the differences that we're seeing here is just clearly unlawful policies that they seem willing to roll the dice on. And my sense is they're just paying a lot less attention to the lawyers, even within the government, who are advising them on what the statutes say, what the courts might say. And so there's just not this presumption of good faith about the executive branch trying to comply with the law. And there's no substitute for that. We're fighting against it. I hope that this is a temporary phase that we will get past and then be able to rebuild. But not to speak too big picture, but yeah, our system of government relies on having an executive branch that is faithfully trying to implement the laws. And it's very challenging when that's not the situation.
What would you say is the state of our legal army of people who are like you, that are helping as much as you can to defend the natural world, working with organizations? On some days, I'm like, man, we have some powerhouses out there. I feel today like we've really got this covered. And other days, when there's such a barrage, I'm like, how do you guys stand up under this? The lawyers that are in your organization and in other organizations, generally, do you feel good? I mean, I kind of overall feel really good. Like, you guys are getting resources. We're having a lot of good successes. You're there to fight the uphill battles and everything else. But how do you characterize it?
Yeah, I think you characterize it well, and both of those things are true. When we're up against the federal government, we are the underdogs, right? I mean, we're nonprofit organizations that are trying to prevent the federal government from violating the law and trampling on the environment. We've shown a lot of resiliency. We have a lot of support and a lot of clients who are willing to fight these battles for the long run. It's not that we're able to match the resources of the federal government, but I think we have shown that some of the tactics that the administration has tried to use just to dismiss environmental issues, and of course the environment is just one example there, but to dismiss those issues, make it seem like, oh, like we've just moved on from caring about all of that, right? Like that has fallen flat, and the advocates, both within our organizations and the clients we serve, are not going anywhere. So, whatever happens, there are good days and there are bad days, but we're still going to be here fighting.
What would you say to someone who's listening? They're young, they're thinking about maybe what they're going to do after their undergrad, about how much you guys need more of you? Why do you do this, and how could that maybe turn on some folks who are thinking about what their next move is, maybe going into law?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there are certainly days where being in this field of work, it's like, oh, I can't look away. It would be nice just not to read the news today, and that's not really an option. But I feel so grateful every day, considering that we are facing all of these challenges and all of these attacks on the environment, that I get to go to work and do something about it, that I'm not just reading a headline and feeling outraged, but in some extremely small way and in a collaboration with many, many other people, I get to have some influence over how all of this turns out. And I think that's the best and most empowering feeling to have right now. So I would say whatever people are interested in, there's a way to put it to good use. If you want to be an environmental lawyer, awesome, I'm happy to talk to you. But if you're more interested in science or other fields, there are ways to get involved and advocate for the issues that you care about.
And at your organization, Earthjustice, that's earthjustice.org. You can check out everything that's going on there. You might as well, if you're going to be bombarded with headlines every day, include Earthjustice's announcements in that, because you'll be getting it direct from the source. And it looks like 230 attorneys now in 15 offices across the country. So that's a really big deal. That makes me feel so good. Even though I heard everything you said, going up against the Fed, it's a David and Goliath thing, but it seems like our justice system does some good in making it so that you guys cannot just be completely steamrolled every time you go to court, So it's still very heartening. So yeah, that's earthjustice.org. Go there, support it. And Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to keep tracking you and finding out how this whole thing plays out. We kind of feel like we know how it's going to play or how it should play out, but it's still interesting watching you guys do your work. And I can't wait for that press release that says, well, this one's over.
I will look forward to that too. And thank you so much for speaking with me. It was a pleasure to be here, and also grateful to all of the listeners who care about this issue.
On behalf of everyone at the Rewilding Institute, thank you for listening, sharing, and supporting the Rewilding Earth podcast. Over the last 9 years, this show has grown into a significant global community because of people like you. If you'd like to keep that momentum going and rewild the world with us, please head over to rewilding.org/donate. Your support ensures we keep telling the stories that the wild needs us to hear. Thanks for listening.